Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. We got a big show today. The one and only Professor Jeffrey Sachs is going to join us to be able to break down that big Ukraine summit from yesterday. So really looking forward to hearing what he thought of everything that has transpired to this date. We also had some other interesting sound come from Trump as a part of that summit, talking about how he's getting rid of mail-in ballots. He also posted Truth Social to the same effect, also sort of floating the idea of, hey, maybe for a war, we just don't have an election. So
he wants to copy Ukraine.
Yeah.
Got the idea.
Lot to take note of there and break down. Also, we were asking the question whether Gavin Newsom is going to meme his way to the presidency. He seems to be making some progress in that regard. Very interesting dynamics unfolding there. A little bit of weird horseshoe going on as well. So we'll break that down for you. The ADL chief is just outright lying about Zoran Mamdani. So we've got the receipts on that. And some quite noteworthy developments vis-a-vis Israel. Hamas has accepted a ceasefire deal. I wouldn't get too excited yet because, you know, the Israelis will probably decide they just want to continue the war. But we did want to give you those details as well as some other updates. Before we jump into the show and this interview with Professor Sachs, Sagar had some great breaking news yesterday, very significant. Why don't you break down for folks what you found and were able to get your hands on?
For our premium members, I dropped it last night just to get ahead of the news. But basically, you'll remember the story about Tom Alexandrovich, the Israeli government official who was caught up in an FBI child sex sting. Actually got my hands on some of the arrest documents and specifically the interview notes. And what we found inside of the documents is that Alexandrovich immediately identified himself as an Israeli government official. The FBI and HSI agents who interviewed him basically said, we're going to contact the embassy on your behalf. This directly contradicts the prime minister's office, who said that they didn't know that he had been arrested. He said, I need to get on a flight to Israel immediately. Like, he was making it clear, I need to arrange for my international travel back to Israel after being caught up in the sting. And most importantly, he was here basically on government business to attend a, quote, black hat conference for cybersecurity professionals. He had met with FBI agents and an upcoming meeting with the NSA, so with our own security establishment. This is all on the record here from the documents that we were able to review. So we did drop that early for our premiums, and you know, if you can help support journalism like that, breakingpoints.com if you're able. We're not keeping it behind the paywall or anything. I'm going to release it all publicly today, but it was important to give it to our premium subscribers first.
The other detail there is the undercover agent who was posing as a 15-year-old girl.
I didn't even talk about the actual crime. It's disgusting.
That's what you know is alleged to have occurred here is he was arranging to meet up with this 15-year-old girl for the explicit purposes of sexual contact. Unbeknownst to him, this was, you know, an undercover agent. He was going to take her to Cirque du Soleil.
And, classy.
Very disgusting. Utterly disgusting. This is the guy that the government was like, oh, let's just make sure you get on a flight to Israel and escape scot-free. Meanwhile, the other people who were caught up in this thing, you know, are under arrest, have court dates, etc. So, very interesting.
Interesting indeed. We will continue to follow the case. I'm hoping to get some more. And by the way, if you are in the Henderson Police Department, the FBI, the HSI, if you are involved in this investigation in any way and you want to talk, hit me up. Let's talk, all right? Because you know, I will be knocking on your door and I will be beating down your door, or I guess virtually, to try and get on the phone. There's still several leads that I would like to follow up on. There's some very interesting stuff potentially behind the scenes. But anyway, with that, we've got Professor Jeffrey Sachs standing by. Let's get to it. We are very excited now to be joined by our friend Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who is obviously a major geopolitical expert, and he's going to help us break down the Trump, Ukraine, and European summit that happened yesterday. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So, Professor, first, we're going to go through this so that you can help break this down through the audience, kind of clip by clip, and each one of those things that it represents. To us, the major headline that came out of the summit was Trump not ruling out United States troops on the ground in Ukraine to provide some sort of Article 5 style security guarantee inside of Ukraine as some sort of grand peace deal with Russia. Here's Trump refusing to rule it out.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you rule that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
will be involved, Professor, so not refusing to, or basically refusing to rule out not putting U.S. troops on the ground. There were several other instances during the meeting where this, quote, Article 5 style guarantee was brought up by many of the European leaders. Of course, we're hearing from the Kremlin, but first we want your reaction to what that would mean to the overall situation and Trump's rhetoric here and what it could potentially mean for any sort of peace deal.
Well, I don't believe we've just had 11 years of war and that the war is about to stop because the United States or Europe says they're going to have troops on the ground or Article 5-like agreements. This whole war started because the United States was pushing NATO to surround Russia and as far eastward as they could get. So I don't think that the Russian side is going to say, sure, whatever you like. What we saw yesterday was I wouldn't say a master class, but it was a class in ambiguity on everything. Nothing was clear. Nothing was very truthful. Nothing was settled. But there is a general recognition that Ukraine is losing on the battlefield, a general fact that the United States political scene is not going to continue any large-scale war, proxy or otherwise, with Russia, and so that something should be done to end this. But the specifics are as vague as can be, and deliberately so, and Trump thinks that the way to make deals is to prevaricate, to make things vague, to keep things behind the scenes, to pull each person in as his buddy to say yes to everything in an oblique way. But it's not going to end with the Article 5-like guarantees. In my view, the Russians have been fighting against that basically for more than 30 years. They've been in a hot war over it for 11 years because this war started in February 2014 when the United States conspired in a coup to overthrow a neutralist government. And the Russians aren't going to just say, yeah, Trump, you're our buddy. You put troops if you want. I don't believe it. Right. I think it would also be a terrible idea if the United States had troops in Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you could put A4 up on the screen, guys. Kremlin negatively reacting to that proposal of Article 5, like security guarantees. Certainly no surprise there. You know, just zooming out a bit, Professor, I'd just love to get your thoughts on what are the core sticking points for the Russians. What would be a deal that they would be interested in? What sort of conditions would the U.S., the Ukrainians, the Europeans, the West broadly have to meet in order to conclude some sort of a grand peace deal and bring this war to a close?
We have to understand where the war came from and therefore how it can end. The war started with the continuation of the Cold War after 1991. People thought there was peace, but the CIA, the military-industrial complex, continued the effort to weaken Russia. Brzezinski talked about Russia falling into three pieces in a 1997 article saying that maybe there'll be a loose confederation of a European Russia, a Siberian Russia, a Far East Russia. But the U.S. design was that Russia should finally basically be crushed, that the Cold War was with the Soviet Union, but we're not over yet. We're dominant. We won. And on that basis, Clinton began NATO enlargement. I say Clinton because basically every president then did the bidding of the military-industrial complex. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump won, Biden. And maybe this is going to end this crazy misadventure, but this has been 30 years of trying to push NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia, by the way, in the South Caucasus, where the U.S. meddling continues to this day. The idea is Russia's a big country, and therefore it should be a weak country, according to the U.S. Strategic doctrine. Okay, we overthrew a government in February 2014, installed a pro-NATO regime. Russia immediately took back Crimea at that moment because the post-coup government in Ukraine said, okay, we want Russia out of its Black Fleet naval base in Crimea. That's a naval base that Catherine the Great established in 1783 and that has been core to Russia's national security and power since 1783. The United States and let's say the deep state said, we want Russia out of there. That was the same idea of the British and the French in 1853 of trying to get Russia out of Crimea in the Crimean War. Okay, enough history. The basic point is Russia does not want to be surrounded. It does not want NATO present. It does not want security guarantees like Article 5. It does not want Western troops on the ground. It wants Ukraine, at a minimum, to be a neutral buffer zone between the United States and its proxies and allies and Russia. That's the bottom line. So, starting point, no NATO. Similarly, nothing that's NATO-like or NATO-light of French and British troops and German troops, and that's what the whole war has been about.
Right.
Second, Crimea is never going back. This is absolutely clear. This was a gambit. This was a ploy of NATO to grab Crimea, and the whole idea, which Brzezinski spelled out in 1997, was if we can basically get Ukraine and push Russia out of the Black Sea, then Russia has no power in the Middle East. It has no power in the Eastern Mediterranean. And that was part of the strategy. So Crimea staying. Then come the territories that Russia has annexed as of November 2022. This is 2 in the east and 2 in the south. The idea of this goes back to 2 points. One is that at least in the east, these are overwhelmingly ethnically Russian regions, the Donbass. And Russia said in 2015, make them autonomous. We don't want them as territory, but make them autonomous under a treaty called the Minsk II Agreement. The United States, typically, because it was still in its expansionist mode, said no, told Ukraine, you don't have to honor that agreement. Russia did not claim those territories. It just said, leave them alone to have the Russian language, Russian ethnicity, and so forth. And Ukraine, in the post-coup environment, said, no, we will take them in a unitary state. So Russia grabbed those back. Now it's claimed those back because the Minsk II agreement failed.
The reason why I think the map is quite important, sir, is if you look at the red areas, this is, I guess, this is, I mean, probably as accurate as it gets. This is the United States, intelligence community creating this map for the president in the Oval Office, which he used. And as you were talking, you can actually see the percentage numbers that have been listed here by the U.S. intelligence community. If we zoom in, we can see some 70 to 80 to 90% of many of these provinces, like you were these areas, like you were talking about, and they're controlled by Russia. So you can just, as you can see from that map, it backs up much of what you're saying.
So the basic idea is that, ironically, before the United States made the coup in February 2014, Russia was not claiming these territories at all. Not at all. We blew it for Ukraine because this is so typical of the CIA, by the way. We lose for our supposed friends. So when the coup came and Kiev, that is the new central government in the post-coup Ukraine, said we'll crack down on the ethnic Russian regions in the east and the south, a treaty was brokered by Russia to stop what was then a beginning war called the Minsk I and then the Minsk II agreements. And the idea was that those regions, especially the 2 in the east, Lugansk and Donetsk, would be autonomous. Interestingly, by the way, just a little footnote, the model of that was a European model. In Italy, there is a German-speaking region called South Tyrol, which has autonomy within Italy. Actually, Chancellor Merkel, who was then the German chancellor, knew about that and said that the Minsk II agreement can be modeled like South Tyrol. In other words, an autonomous region in Italy, but of German speakers, but very peaceful, very successful, very beautiful, wonderful skiing and tourism, by the way. And they said that could be the solution. The United States wasn't having it. And the extremist nationalists in Ukraine were not having it. They said, no autonomy, unitary state. And they blew the chance to keep those provinces because after Russia's invasion, they control almost all of it now. That's what the shaded areas of the map are. The battle line control, the battlefield control that Russia has over these areas. Now, where does that bring us till today? Ukraine cannot win back those territories other than through a massive war, which could, again, be a massive failure, massive deaths, a massive escalation to nuclear war. So it can't really win those back. Ukraine has said every day, we'll never give up a square meter of our territory. Impossible. This is all ours. The European leaders who were there yesterday have parroted that line. Well, what's the alternative? The alternative then is the fighting continues. If the fighting continues as it's continuing now, Russia will simply take those regions physically. It will proceed to take more territory, by the way, of Ukraine. And eventually, I think on the current scenario, Ukraine would simply be conquered. The hardline warmongers, and Merz is a true warmonger. He is really disgusting, in my view, by the way, awful chancellor, just unbelievable. Every word he says is more war. Basically, they say, sure, let's escalate. We won't give up an inch. Well, this already has been the last 11 years. I don't think Trump wants that. I don't think his MAGA base wants that. I don't think the American people want that. The Ukrainian people don't want that. The most recent Gallup survey in Ukraine said, stop this war. We're exhausted. More than 1 million Ukrainians have died. So all of this is to say that no NATO, a neutral Ukraine, Crimea is ours, and these 4 territories are contested. What is likely to happen is some de facto recognition that Russia controls these, that there will be a permanent peace. Maybe Ukraine in the end will not recognize them de jure, but if the war ends, it will end with these areas being under, let's say, permanent Russian control.
Just to back you up on the Merz point, the German chancellor set a condition which seems very important, because one of the goals of this meeting was to eventually lead to a meeting between Donald Trump, Vladimir Zelensky, and Vladimir Putin. What has now come out is that there is a disagreement within the European Union and by these major NATO powers as to the preconditions for that meeting. Chancellor Merz was probably the most pessimistic in his language, demanding an immediate ceasefire as a precondition. Guys, let's go ahead and take a listen, please. A3.
We all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
So you could see he says an immediate ceasefire. He was the most pessimistic in his language, but he was backed up by Emmanuel Macron. One of the things I also took note of is that even though Donald Trump, in his Truth Social post after the meeting, said there will be a meeting between Zelensky and Putin and then eventually a trilateral, there was no such mention of any future meeting with Putin by Zelensky in his comments afterwards. It seems to be one that Trump wants to happen. So this precondition of a ceasefire seems to be the way that both the European Union, the major NATO powers, and Zelensky can get out of any future diplomacy. Or am I seeing it wrong?
You know, nobody speaks in a straightforward way. Maybe that's to be expected, but it also is why we're at war endlessly, because there's dishonesty everywhere. There was no straightforward discussion. What are the alternatives? Merz, he hasn't said one thing that I've agreed with since he became chancellor. And I would say that that's basically true of the German people also, because Merz's popularity is in a free fall, or his approval rating, let's say, is in a free fall. It's down to around 30%. He came in with the majority support, as you do when you've won an election, and it's in free fall because he doesn't make any sense. Russia will not agree to a ceasefire without a solution to the issues that we've been discussing. That's been Russia's position, understandably, by the way, in my opinion, from the start. Well, we are at war for reasons. Von Clausewitz, the German war theorist of the 19th century, famously said that war is a continuation of politics with other means. And so this is a very important observation. This is a war about politics. It's a war about NATO. It's a war about U.S.-Russia relations. It's a war about the U.S. overthrowing governments with impunity. By the way, it seems to be a rule that once you've overthrown a few governments, you retire to Columbia University as my colleague, because we have Victoria Nuland, we have Hillary Clinton, we have Mike Pompeo. I don't know. And they teach diplomacy. This is unbelievable to me. But this is part of what this war is about, which is that the U.S. acted with impunity after 1991 and told us that they would. The Project for a New American Century said, hey, we're not only the big kid on the block, we're the only kid on the block. We're the sole superpower. We are the world's policeman. We are the world's hegemon. We do what we want. That's what this war was about originally. Now, Trump, I think, probably understands that the American people are just sick of this, by the way. It's endless wars. It's not only this war, it's the wars throughout the Middle East that Israel wangles us into, absolutely destructive and vile wars. And the American people are sick of it. Nobody speaks straightforwardly. Trump doesn't explain after Alaska or after yesterday anything. There's no speech from the Oval Office. There's no explanation. We're in a different time from the time that I used to remember. Not that things were perfect, but if President Kennedy wanted to achieve a treaty with the Soviet Union, he'd give a speech, and then people would analyze the speech and understand it and so forth. Now we have True Social posts that are completely ambiguous, mean nothing, and we're trying to parse what the words mean.
And can be reversed the next day, by the way.
Exactly.
You say one thing and say the exact opposite thing the next day when he's with someone else. I wanted to ask you about how Zelensky figures into all of this. Let's say that the vibes between him and Trump were very different this time than the last time Zelensky was in the Oval Office. Let's go ahead, guys, and play A2.
We had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees, and we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us.
And Professor Zacher and I both noted he seems to have really been working on his English. Clearly, he realizes that it's very important he's able to have an effective relationship with President Trump here. But, you said earlier, it seems like the Ukrainian people are exhausted, want to bring this war to a close. It's not clear that their president is on board with that. What do you make of his role and his positioning and what he wants to see going forward?
First, it's important to understand that there is martial law in Ukraine. We watched the videos also of people being forcibly knocked off their bicycles or dragged off the street to the front line to their death. And Zelensky is ruling over a military regime, not a democracy. His democratic term of office expired years ago, and he continues to rule by martial law, basically by decree. So I don't give any legitimacy to his statements as reflecting the will of the Ukrainian people. This is a starting point. I've never really admired what he's done, because rather than signing a peace agreement that he had in front of him in April 2022 that would have ended this war on far better terms than anything that's going to happen now, he let the United States talk him out of that. Maybe he's a mere puppet anyway. But instead of signing an agreement that was on the table on April 15th, 2022, in the so-called Istanbul process, he walked away from a peace agreement. Since then, has lost massive territory and probably 1 million Ukrainian dead. So I'm no fan, I have to say. I'm no admirer. I'm no believer that this is defending Ukrainian democracy. There is no democracy. And so one of the things that makes the idea that if Zelensky meets with Putin, he's shown to be on the big stage globally, and then he can maintain his power either through winning a re-election, perhaps, or just expanding and extending his military rule. But this seems to be the carrot that Trump is dangling to Zelensky. I'll put you on the big stage. We won't overthrow you. We won't let Putin diss you. You'll have respect, but you have to give in on this, this, and this. So, right. Frankly, Zelensky is, look, he's losing a war on the battlefield. He doesn't have the public support. He rules by martial law. By all accounts, which I can't personally verify, but by all accounts, the regime is incredibly corrupt. So not only am I no fan, I think probably what Trump is trying to do is to appeal to the most narrow and basest survival instincts of Zelensky himself, and dangling this meeting with Putin, the big stage summit, as the prize, and then getting Zelensky in one way or another to basically end the rhetoric of fighting on to restore the 1991 borders. I think that's what's happening.
Last thing we wanted your take on, sir, is some of the continuation, because, the threat from the United States is, well, if this doesn't work, we'll just go to more sanctions, as if Russia is not the most sanctioned country in the world. Already, we've actually seen, we can put A7, please, here on the screen. Both Lindsey Graham and the White House advisor, Peter Navarro, say that India's, quote, Russian crude oil buying must stop. Of course, even the imposition of 50% tariffs on India has not changed their behavior a single iota. In fact, Narendra Modi is posting about phone calls with President Putin just yesterday. I believe I was reading this morning that the Chinese foreign minister is actually in New Delhi as of this morning, meeting with the Indian foreign minister. So they're basically holding up a middle finger to the U.S. in response to these tariffs. So it does appear that many of the cards that are supposedly left to play, both by the Europeans and the U.S., don't really exist if they want to put any more, quote, pressure on Russia.
Lindsey Graham is the worst senator in the U.S. Senate. I just want to be on the record stating that. I will state that every show you have me on. He's a fool, just a fool. Okay, let me put that aside to get onto the substance. The imposition of the 25% penalty tariff on India was the stupidest tactical move of U.S. foreign policy for a long time. And that's saying a lot, by the way. I could make a list of the top 10, the top 20.
I'd like to see that list, Professor.
Yes.
If you make
why don't
it,
we talk about that
list.
sometime?
Yeah.
But what it did overnight was unify the BRICS countries as never before. That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I watched it, by the way, pretty close up, actually, because I know the leaders in all of these countries. Within 24, 48 hours, there was a flurry of calls. Brazil with India, Brazil with Russia, Brazil with China, China with India, China with Russia. Donald Trump was the great unifier of the BRICS. And wonderful. Okay, I like the BRICS, by the way. So I have no problem with that. But the opposite of what Lindsey Graham conceivably could have been thinking, or Peter Navarro, who, okay, I'll put him on the list of probably the most incompetent PhD that my former department ever granted. He is a PhD in economics that apparently learned nothing, certainly didn't take my class. But in any event, going after India, a country that the U.S. has been cultivating for strategic and diplomatic relations, and it's a long story, but trying to get India on side against China and the so-called Quad arrangement and so many things. And Trump ended it overnight because, by the way, even if this 25% tariff penalty is removed, and I think it probably will be, the Indians learned a lesson that I was trying to tell them, by the way, for years. You cannot trust the United States. And no, we've got the inside track. We've got good relations. No, you don't. There's no ability to have a trusting relationship with the United States. This is improv land. And you're not going to get the kind of relationship that you think. Well, everybody in India understands that completely. Not only have the BRICS countries been pulled together, but in the media in India, in the print and online media, nonstop.
We've covered some of that
here. We played it here.
Days and days. What is the United States doing? We have to find our friends and so forth. So this was a blunder that has zero practical import of getting anyone to any negotiating tables, zero. But it completely undermined one strand of U.S. foreign policy built up for years. I don't like that strand, so I like the BRICS. So good. The BRICS are much stronger and more united now than ever. Fine. Donald Trump united them. Peter Navarro united them. Lindsey Graham united them. Congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree.
Professor, thank you so much for spending some time with us and helping us understand all these issues. We're going to have you back to get that top 10 list, though.
Yeah, we do. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, let's do that. That'll be fun. All right, thanks a lot.
Have a great day.
Great to be with you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.